Hello there, Ray here, and today I will be showing a simple device which allows you to detect when a player gets close to your base. This uses the new Skulk sensor in 1.17. They're able to detect a wide range of vibration types. And during our Snapchat testing stream, we came up with tons of cool things you can do with them, including making this long-range player sensor. If you'd like to see the other things that we tested with the Skulk sensor, check out my archived live streams over there on Twitch, or these videos where I show how you can make secret traps and doors, also short-range player sensors, and even a new AFK fish farm using it. All that'll be linked down below. Now today I will be going over two different devices. They work very similar, but also very differently. And currently over 60% of you guys are not subscribed. So if you could just please hit that red button. We're trying to reach a goal of at least 40% of everybody being subscribed. And everybody who already did that, you guys are the best. So the way that this works is pretty easy to understand. Essentially everything in Minecraft only works around the player if the chunks are loaded by him. So like this device here, making this trapdoor flicker, is doing something. This armor stand hopping up and down is also doing something. But if I would move farther away from this, the game is going to start unloading chunks, and eventually those things are no longer going to be doing what they were doing before. And the main reason this is in the game is to optimize it. That way the game could put more performance towards things that are happening closer to the player and less towards ones that are happening farther from the player. So if the player would go too far away, both these redstone signals are going to be turned off. And if the player would come in closer, they're both going to turn on. Even though the device which is activating these things is way down here at this end. So besides being a player detecting machine, it's also a chunk loading detection machine. And I have a lot of in-depth videos throughout the years covering how chunk loading works. But I'll give you guys a brief rundown with an illustration from this amazing data pack that Fax made me, specifically to show how chunks are being loaded. You can see some information popping up in chat. If we do F3 plus G, this is a little thing you can do to show where the chunks are in the game. We're going to pay attention to three different chunks: the green one, the red one, and this gray one here. And in the chat you see there is sections that say chunk 3 times with different numbers. Each of those numbers represent a different chunk, so we got 3 different chunks which we'll be looking at, and that information in chat will update as we move away from it. Let's go back to the beginning and we'll see what happens to these chunks. So right now you can see that we got something else happening in chat. One of the chunks went from green to red. If we go a little farther, we stand here, you can see now we have one chunk that's green, one that's red, and one that's gray. Now this corresponds to the chunks which are being loaded by the player. The amount of those that are being loaded is determined by your render distance in single player. So currently I have it set to 12. That means the initial chunk that I'm sitting in is kind of considered ground zero, and then we would count out 12 chunks, and anything beyond that would not be loaded. Let's go ahead and count these out. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So when I was standing over there, anything beyond this one wouldn't be loaded by the game. But not all chunks are treated the same. You can see we got 3 different colors. The green is entity processing, meaning that things like entities like this armor stand, if you do F3 plus B, we can see this hitbox, which illustrates that it is an entity. Stuff like that will be processed in this chunk, as well as any ones that are closer to the player. The red chunk here illustrates redstone processing or block processing. So something like this observer clock, which is turning on and off very fast. That stuff can still occur in this chunk, but something like entity moving cannot. But block processing also applies to everything closer to the player. Now when the player is way over there, the very last chunk is this one here, which is not really used by too much for the game. It's kind of a buffer between stuff happening and stuff not happening. But one thing that does occur in this chunk is the game does keep track of how many mobs are in this chunk as well as any other ones that are closer. And we can actually take a look at this by pulling up F3. And if we looked on the left hand side, right where my cursor is, there is this M. And that stands for monster, and that'll tell you how many monsters are loaded around the player that are counted towards the hostile monster cap. If I was to summon in a shulker here, you'll see the number went from 1 to 2. So the bees here will help us see what's going on in these chunks from very far away. And we also got these little devices that will tell us what's going on here in a more survival friendly way. Obviously you can't have little command things telling you what's going on out here. So this one here will tell us when the chunk is no longer entity processing. This one here will tell you when this chunk is no longer redstone processing. And this little shulker here will tell us when this chunk is no longer mob cap processing. Let's go to the very end and we'll see if we can make sense of everything that's going on out there. So from this location here, everything is working fine. The little devices are going off. The entity processing one, which is the green one, it's also showing up in green in chat. That one is still putting out a signal. The redstone processing one, which is in the red chunk and also shows up red in the chat, is still putting off his signal over here. And the gray chunk, which we can't really use redstone to easily detect, but we can look at our F3. We can still see that monsters are a count of 2. So from this location, everything works fine. If I would back up one chunk, so if I cross this chunk border right here, you'll see stuff starts turning off. Entity processing turned off. The redstone processing also turned off. And in the F3, the M went down to 1 instead of 2 because we unloaded that shulker as well. And in the chat, we can also see some stuff change. Essentially, everything shifted towards us. So that one chunk that was at the very end with the shulker went from mobcap processing to unloaded, so it doesn't even show up in the chat anymore. But we have a new one that is mob processing, which is the next closest one. And the next closest one is redstone processing. And if we would move closer, we could see everything starts turning back on again. We got our signals, entity processing, as well as block processing. And the chat also went back to showing each of those far away chunks being loaded as we had them set up. So let's go back out there again. So that's the basics of how chunk loading works around the player. I did a lot more videos going into more detail about how you can load chunks without the player and showing a lot of cool devices that work around those. You can find all that linked in the description. Let's take a look at these actual devices here and see how you can implement them into your survival world. Now, we did test a lot of different things that could activate the Sculk sensor, but the two that I'm showing you today are probably the easiest to build. So this one here is for entity processing chunks. I made this little device here which has armor sand bouncing up and down in this bubble column, and every time the armor sand hits the water, it's going to make a splash event which the Sculk sensor can detect and send out some redstone signals. Very consistent as it keeps bouncing. It's very compact as well, and the Sculk sensor just needs to be within 8 blocks of it to be able to sense it. And every time it gets an event, it'll be powered on for 2 seconds and it'll turn off for a short period and then turn back on again when it gets a new event. So I extended the pulse using this fade out clock. So during the period where it normally would turn off, it will stay a constant signal, and it will only turn off when this is unloaded as an entity processing chunk. The redstone signal just goes all the way to the player, and every 16 blocks we have a repeater. And the length which you want this redstone to go would be determined by the render distance that you have in your single player world, which you can check by looking here. If you are a multiplayer, one way that you can check for render distance is by turning your render distance on your client up as high as possible, and then kind of looking off in the corner of your screen how the chunks are loaded. So if I stand over here, I'll keep moving closer until I can see that gray chunk. Then I'll move away, and then when that gray chunk disappears, we'll be able to count the chunks up. So all the ones that are showing up, there is 10 green ones and also 1 red one which is showing up. That makes a total of 11, and there's always one chunk that's beyond that you can't really see. So that's 12, and that is equivalent to the render distance of this world. So you can kind of figure it out even when you're in multiplayer. And that'll get you to this chunk here. This is kind of like chunk 0, where everything works if the player is here. But if you only want it to work when a new player is coming into your area, then you want to build this a little bit farther from the player. So let's say this is the edge of your base. Right here is the edge. You don't normally go any closer to that direction. So now you'd be here at your base, and you can see these are currently turned off. And I got my second account here in the same world. And let's say that direction over there is where spawn is, and that's typically where people come from. You'll have this device set up so that it warns you when the person even gets remotely close to your base. So let's go ahead and hop into my second account, which is pretending to be the person coming towards the base. So now as I start getting close to the base, I'm going to end up loading those chunks right there. And that already turned on one of the redstone signals. That turned on the block processing chunk, meaning that the player is getting close. If I get a little bit closer, you see it's going to activate the entity processing one, which also activate that note block and also put in a rocket there, kind of give us a visual of what somebody's getting closer. So even though your visitor is over 200 blocks away, you were already informed about his presence. And the visitor has finally made it after traveling for such a long time, but you already knew that they were coming. That's a pretty cool way to detect not only players coming, but also just chunks being loaded. And the other device, this one here, which uses the redstone, works very similar as that one, as it picks up events which are occurring from this trapdoor. Every time this trapdoor opens and closes, it's detected by the sensor, which is putting off a pulse. I got a repeater there just to extend it so it never flickers off until the chunk's actually unloaded. The only difference with this one is it's not sitting entirely inside of one chunk. Unlike this sensor here, which is a device kind of made up of two different types of components, this one here is entity based, meaning it can work in the green chunks, where this Sculk sensor is block processing, meaning that it can actually work in the chunk when it becomes red as well. And essentially that's what I am detecting. I'm detecting the difference when it switches from a green chunk to a red chunk. That's pretty easy to do in this setup here because we have something that only works in green chunks and something that can work in both red and green chunks. But over here, both these devices work in green chunks as well as red chunks, so I can't detect the difference, at least not as easily. But by having them over a chunk border like this one is constantly sending out signals, but when this chunk goes into being the gray, which is mobcat processing, it will no longer send out signals to this trapdoor, which it won't flicker, and therefore this Sculk sensor, which is in a different chunk, which at that point would be a red chunk, can still update and say, hey, I'm not getting any more signals from this chunk, therefore I'm going to turn off. Now you can also choose to switch out the trapdoor with a dispenser and then change this repeater to 4 game ticks. And they work very similar. And if you've seen my other chunk detecting redstone devices throughout the years, this is essentially how they all work. So you can build either of these if you want to make a player detection or chunk loading detection. You can also build multiple of these, like you can build one of these for every chunk, so you can actually tell as the player is walking closer, closer, closer. Or you can actually have these far away in a couple different directions, like I can have one off in this direction. If I go back to the white chunk, I could also have one way off in that direction, way off in that direction, So I can tell if players are coming from any direction, or I can even make them overlap like a checkerboard and be able to triangulate the exact chunk that the player is standing in over an extremely large area. So the potentials for this are quite a lot. If you'd like to take a look at this machine as well as any other crazy things that I've did for 1.17, I will provide this world download in the description. Yet the device itself is so simple. Now in the future I will be doing a more in-depth video about chunk detection as well as chunk loading. I'll put that in the description once it's finished. And if I make any updates to this device in the future, I'll always put the newest video at the top of the description as well as pinned comment. And if you enjoyed learning about cool things in the game Minecraft, make sure to check out the playlist on Simple Farms machines, as well as the one that's completely dedicated to weird glitches in the game. I know you'll have fun binge watching both those playlists. And if you haven't already, make sure to like this video as well as share it with your favorite Minecrafters so they can use this in their epic bases. I would like to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.